there, I'm Sarah Howard of Get Weaving, and this is my first video. I've been talking about doing this for ages, so I thought I'd better get around and get on with it. I mainly make clothing from my weaving. I'm weaving at the moment on my 20-inch Ashford Knitters loom, which is the one I use for most of my clothing, and I sell my sewing patterns for narrow hand-woven fabrics, and I get asked lots of questions, so I'm going to do a few videos. Hopefully they might help somebody. So maybe you're already weaving lovely pieces of fabric like scarves and bags and so forth, but if you want to move on to making clothing, I'm hoping that the videos I do should help you get going. They'll have some tips in and things I've learned over the years, and I'm looking forward to sharing all the bits and pieces that I know. I've been weaving for a long time. I had my first loom when I was 10. My mum taught me how to sew, and the two go together really nicely. So while I'm sitting weaving, I'll talk to you a little bit and we'll go from there. If you want to know any more about my background, the Ashford blog, September 2022, I was very honoured to be asked to be their Artist of the Month, so there's all sorts of things in there. I'm sitting in my workroom at the moment. I've got everything out here that I need. So I have a nice sewing machine, I've got a drum carder, I've got a wheel behind me, I've got fibres. So I design all the patterns out here and the booklets that go with them, and I do my post from here, and it's nice because then I can just shut the door in the evening and go into the house, and it's all ready when I'm out here the next day. I love this loom. If anybody asks me to recommend one, I'm always happy to recommend this because it's easy to set up, it's portable. I've taken this to all sorts of things, to shows, to friends' houses, to the guild I belong to. Some people have sort of said, why not have a wider loom? Well, yes, okay, you can weave wider pieces of fabric, but they also take up a lot more space. This is the length shuttle I'm using, and a wider loom you need a much longer shuttle. So I just find that the 20-inch or maybe 24-inch is about as wide as I would comfortably go. So the videos that I'm going to do, I'm going to break down into sections, and it's just as I say, it's just things that I found work over the years, and I hope might help somebody go from their first bits of weaving to wearing something that they've made. Probably the first thing I'll talk about is designing your fabric, how you choose your yarns, how you make sure that you're going to be using the right set for your yarns, what type of fabric do you want to weave, that sort of thing. Mixing your colours, having a mixed warp, that'll come in there somewhere. There's going to be a session on making a mock-up. So in other words, if you have a sewing pattern that you've never used before, I always recommend making a mock-up version in some spare fabric. I use calico because I like writing on it, and then you do all your alterations. You can fiddle around with it, you can lower the neck, lift the shoulders, change the length, whatever you like, until you get something that you love and you would be happy to wear, because there's nothing worse, in my opinion, than making something from your beautiful hand woven fabric and then you don't like it and then it never gets worn. So I'm going to do something on making a mock-up, how you make things fit, and then you're going to set your loom up to weave your fabric, and after that it's going to be sewing tips, things that you can do that help with your sewing, A lot of the yarns I use are knitting yarns, so little things I find using a ballpoint needle helps. It's a bit gentler, it doesn't rip all the fibres. And then it's going to be about finishes, how you wash your fabric, how you cut it without it fraying, how you stitch it together. So quite basic, a lot of it. I've learnt through trial and error. Don't we all? Then at the end it'll be sort of extra bits like making your own bias binding, covering your buttons, what you do with your offcuts, useful books, all that sort of stuff. So this piece of weaving that I'm doing at the moment, this is for a pinafore dress. I've nearly come to the end of it. When it's finished, I'll take this off and wash it, and then I'll be setting the loom up to make this pattern here. This is T001. It's one of the most popular patterns that I do. It's a simple top. I'm going to make the version with sleeves, but slightly shorter, and it's going to be in wool, which I have spun. Again, something left over from another project. I have woven a little sample. If I show you, I didn't used to make samples. I used to learn it as I sort of went along. So this is the sample for that one. It's a little tiny weeny one, but it's enough. It's been washed. This was 5 dent. Nope, I beg your pardon, 7.5, that one. And what I do is I draw around it like this. That's before washing, and then I'm going to draw around it again and see how much it's shrunk, just to make sure that I've got the right set. And then right at the very end, the last video will probably be called Help. What happens if your weaving is too short, too narrow, or just isn't how you thought it was going to be? Because it's happened to all of us. I used to, if something hadn't worked, I'd just put it on a shelf and think, well, never mind, I'll use it for something else. I've had pieces of fabric I've woven for jackets and ended up making skirts. It doesn't matter. But that night, well, maybe that's not the way to start. So instead of that, it might be best to sample, get the set right, and it makes the weaving work better as well. If you want a balanced weave, you probably aren't going to be wanting to do weft face weaves for clothing. I like my clothing to be comfortable, so it's more like a knitwear, if you like, than something that's hand woven. So this jacket I'm wearing at the moment, it's all hand spun as usual. Bits and pieces left over from something else. It's very cozy though. I have Friends with Sheep, which is lovely because I can actually go and choose my fleece. This one here is a grey Shetland, belonged to a friend of mine. So it's lovely. I know what the sheep look like. I even know some of their names. So that's pretty much how it's going to be. I hope, as I say, some of it is some use. It's not the way perhaps everybody works, but it works for me. I tend to get asked the same questions from beginners and from people who've been weaving for years, and I think we all have to start somewhere. I have quite a good understanding of how things are put together, and I'm quite happy to experiment. So it's nice because I can sit out here. I've got a great big work table. I can put big pieces of paper out here. I often make little tiny versions of something just to see how the instructions are going to work. So the process is that I decide what I'm going to make, which might be a copy of a favourite garment like a fleece or a pair of dungarees or something. I make the pattern for myself. I make the mock-up. I try it on, I alter it as needs be. Then I work out how I'm going to weave the fabric. And obviously from the mock-up I can work out how much fabric I need. Then obviously I have to add on shrinkage, loom take up, loom wastage, all that sort of thing. So on the patterns, on the back it says fabric requirements, so that is how much finished washed fabric you would need to make a particular garment. I don't put on things like loom wastage because all the looms are different. You might be weaving this on a floor loom, you might be weaving something on a backstrap loom. They're all slightly different, so it's just finished fabric as if you were going into a shop and buying a piece of fabric. So they are sized, they're multi-size patterns. So obviously the first thing you need to do is take your measurements. And don't muddle up inches and centimetres. There are seam allowances on the patterns. So hopefully there's pretty much everything. I've tried to make the instructions as clear as possible, and they've got diagrams as well. So as I said, hopefully they help somebody. Now I'm nearly finishing with this. I'll have to wind a bit more onto the weft, and then what I'll do is I'll show you around my workroom.